if you remember, I said that with this subject, there's no Microsoft certification, the TAFE assessments, which is good. You hopefully you can get these done very quickly and have one of these subjects in the bag or checked off and over and done with. So let's have a look at the practical assessment. So this practical assessment is already there for you to look at. Same with the other assignments. So you can, if you have a look at it, you can keep one eye on what you have to do while you're learning how to do it, if you know what I mean. So this first part is all about, the preamble. So basically with this, what do you need to do? You need basically your Windows 10 ISO that you might have created or downloaded today, and you need VMware Workstation. And you can read the scenario if you like, but first of all, if you don't have VMware Workstation on your computer, you'll have to install it. I'm assuming most of you would have done that already. And then you have to create a new virtual machine. Okay, so creating a new virtual machine is not necessarily the same as installing the OS. Okay, when we say create a new virtual machine, it really defines the virtual hardware of that virtual machine. We're going to name this virtual machine your last name, test VM. So me will be my first name, last name. So for me, it will be Alex Zhao test VM. And the operating system I'm going to create for it is Windows 10. So if you remember, that was choosing what operating system was going into it, not actually installing it. And we just had a discussion about number of processes. So that's exactly what this is talking about. This is saying 2 processes. It's not talking about cores. So you can assume it's 2 processes, 1 core each. And then the amount of memory, that's the RAM, 2 gigs. Okay, 2048 megabytes is equivalent to 2 gigs. You're going to, how many network adapters? These are network interface cards, virtualized ones. You need 1 network interface card, which is connected to an internal only network, called host only, and another one. And you're going to give it an IP address with that IP address and that mask. Then how many hard drives do you need? You need 2 hard drives. Each of them are going to be 60 gigs each, and then you're storing them as single files. I think you would have seen that happen as you're installing the operating system today. So there was a question just then. I might have missed it. So bear with me. I might just put that chat window on a different screen. All right. So who said that? All right. So now will it say mask or DNS? Sorry. What's that question in reference to? So you're talking about disk? This is what's called the subnet mask. Okay, so that's the subnet mask. That's the IP address. It doesn't mention it doesn't mention the DNS at all. So if you're wondering what the hell is a subnet mask, we're going to cover that in another subject altogether. But as a fundamental networking, let's talk about quickly the subnet mask. So if this is and this was my network card. If I right click on it, so trust me, you'll learn this along the way. So some of these things, it may seem like, why is he doing this? Because don't forget, we're looking at the assessment. You still got a few different modules to cover before you can do the assessment. So with the TCP/IP, so hopefully everyone has heard of this. This is the IP address. This is the subnet mask. And basically, the subnet mask and the IP address, from that we can tell which part of this IP address is the network ID, network portion. So you can see that those ones which are on top of the 255s are what we call the network portion. And the part that's over the 0 is the host portion, meaning that if two computers were to be on the same network, then their first 3 parts of the IP address must be this, and the last part of the IP address it needs to be different. So that's what they're referring to, okay, with the idea of that mask. It's talking about the subnet mask. All right. So if we keep, so we'll learn all about IP addressing in another subject. Yeah, Liana asked when it talks about internal network host only. No, you don't have to do that on campus. That's basically, if we look at this virtual machine again, if you remember when you define the virtual networking, you told her what when you defined the network adapter, it told you chose which network it was going to be on. Bridge, NAT, host only. You'll see that there's a module coming up that's all about virtual networking, and basically that host only is this one that we're talking about. And that's basically which network this virtual machine is plugged into. All right, so but like I said, some of these things are not going to make sense to you because we're talking about what we're trying to achieve at the end of the day. But you'll see that as you're doing it, as you're doing the learning materials, you'll realize that, hey, that was for that practical assignment, wasn't it? That part was needed for the practical assignment. So yeah, if by going through this right now, hopefully that allows you to sort of have an idea as you're doing it, what's needed. So some of these things you already can do, like creating a new virtual machine. Maybe you need a bit more practice, but you have gone through hopefully you've gone through that first module where you create a new virtual machine and install the operating system. So that then takes us to installing of the operating system, which is Windows 10. And then after you've installed the operating system, we install this special tool, which is called VMware Tools, which allows us to interact with the virtual machine a lot easier. And then we create a snapshot. Okay, so if you haven't covered the topic on snapshots yet, you will cover it and we will talk about what it is. You'll notice that in this assessment, you're asked to capture screenshots. Screenshots is how we prove you've done it correctly. Yeah, so it may install automatically, it may not. So for example, this machine here has VMware Tools already installed, or doesn't show up. But if it's not installed, I can just install it. It's already installed. Can just update it. And if you do update it, it'll come as a virtual CD-ROM on your virtual machine, and pretty much you can launch it or automatically launch, like you said. So you can either manually install it or it may be automatically installed. But I would suggest you know the manual way as well, just in case it doesn't happen automatically. So it's installing it. It just makes the life easier when you're working with virtual machines. So therefore, you can actually copy and paste files from your real machine to the virtual machine. Adjust the resolution. So you might notice that this is let's close this. This is pretty much rearranging the resolution to fit just right in that window, isn't it? You notice that, look, I'm making it a little bit bigger, but you can see it all still fits in that window. It's basically readjusting the resolution so it fits in the window automatically for me. So that's one of the useful things. There's many others, but we won't go on with that. So like I said, it needs screenshots. Okay, it needs screenshots to prove you've done it correctly. So for example, if I've defined my virtual hardware, I might just need to take a screenshot. So that screenshot might be in the form of the settings. So if you've never taken a screenshot before, all you have to do on your computer, it may be a little bit different if you've got a laptop, but on a normal desktop computer, all you have to do is press the print screen key, or what you can actually do is launch the snipping tool. So let's actually put on this screen, snipping tool. And what that allows us to do is that we can actually use the snipping tool to go new, and I want to just snip this part of it. And you know what? There it is. Okay. And if I actually go to my document and say, hey, that was what I did, let's paste it in. Okay. I might just readjust that a little bit to make it look a little bit better. but you can see that I've proved that I've got a certain amount of memory, CPU, hard drives, and network card configuration, and that's all sort of proving what I've done here. Okay, it doesn't show me the IP address, so that may mean that I might have to go into my virtual machine. I might start a command prompt, or the other way I showed you before, do an ipconfig, for example, and snip that. And, oh, there it is. I could also use the Alt screen to capture the active window, and basically means it takes the whole window. Either way, however you want to take the screenshot, that's how you just put it in the document. Okay, so that's the first set of tasks. The second part is to actually create a second virtual machine. Okay, so I've sort of messed up the things. Create a second virtual machine. This is not necessarily you have to install it from scratch. You might use the cloning method. So if you haven't got up to it yet, there's a topic where we talk about cloning. Cloning is the ability to create a new virtual machine based on a previous virtual machine. You might notice that this is the clone of the DC. I made this virtual machine basically from this virtual machine within seconds. So that you might create that from scratch if you wanted to, but if you're smart and you want to save yourself a bit of time, you could possibly just do a clone, because basically if you look at it, it's a little bit different, but it doesn't mean you can't change it. So for example, if this is one processor, that one had two processors, and this one has 1 gig of hard memory, that one had 2, and I could possibly make this clone, go to the VMware settings, there we go, and the memory was 2, but I want to set to 1. I can't do that right now because the virtual machine's turned on, but I might have to turn it off before I can set it to 1. But you can always adjust the virtual machine settings after the fact anyway. And then you have to ping it. And obviously they should have a similar IP address, but different. So you got to ping each other. So for example, I don't think I can ping myself, I guess, because there's no other computer that is actually on the network right now. And you can see that I'm ping. Ping is a network diagnostic tool which actually allows us to check connectivity, meaning that if I get a reply like what I'm getting here, it means that everything in between my computer and the other computer I'm testing is working and configured correctly. Okay, if the ping doesn't work, you might actually ping the intermediate devices along the path. For example, if I'm trying to ping google.com, but it doesn't work, I might ping my router. I might ping something else on the internet and determine where the problem exists. But that's basically capturing that ICMP or ping. ICMP is another word for ping between the two virtual machines. Then there's this one where you're configuring a shared folder. Again, there's a topic on creating shared folders. A shared folder is not what you think. It's not necessarily between two computers. In the traditional sense, it's the shared folder, which is a VMware tool aspect where it shares a folder between your physical machine or your host machine and your virtual machine or your guest machine. So if I go to options, here's a shared folder. I can actually always enable, and I can map it as a network drive, and I can actually share a folder that's on my real computer as a network drive. And if I click OK to that, it just means that inside of this, I'm going to get a network drive, and that's that downloads folder. You can see that's where all my virtual machines and whatnot are. Configuring IP address. So this is to do with the virtual networking. So on the virtual networking portion of it, realize that besides having these virtual networks, there's a virtual DHCP server, a virtual NAT device, and basically we're configuring some of that. And again, these things come in the later in a couple other topics. And so without going through every detail of every task, that's what we're asked to do in this first assessment. Like I said, some of these things, like the Hyper-V, like cloning, like encryption, like virtual networking, are all coming up in your topics. So you've got the virtual machines, you've managed virtual machines, you're going to convert virtual machines, there's your virtual networking, there's your Hyper-V stuff. So it's all coming around, and basically, as you're doing it, you can sort of try to remember what that you needed that part for it. So we, well, you're not supposed to be doing it as you go along. You're supposed to be doing it in this is a once-off, all done in one go. So you can be preparing for it definitely, because as you're doing different things, you'll realize, you'll take note that, hey, I needed this for the practical assignment. That's good. Then I'll remember that this is, I'll take a note to go back to this instructions to do this. But the idea is that you got these worksheets, you got these instructions on how to do these kind of things. But the idea is that after we finish this subject, if I go on to the next topic and I say, hey, create a clone of that virtual machine and put it on the NAT network, that you'll know how to do it without having to look it up. Because, like I said, it's an underpinning skill for pretty much every other subjects that's to come along. And so once you finish with that assignment, you just upload it here, and basically once you've done, between Joe and I, we'll mark it, and obviously if it's all no problems, if it's no good, hopefully it's not everything, it's just some parts, and we'll give you some feedback, and you'll just fix it, and you'll have another go at it. So just bear in mind, you have 2 attempts at these assessments. Okay, so make sure your first go is a good one, and then even if it's not quite right, you can get some feedback, and then you can fix it up and on your second go and get it passed. Okay, and if you're asking me how much of that do I need to get right to get a pass, well, in this situation, it's going to be all of them. Okay, all the parts needs to be correct to get a pass for this particular topic. And to be honest, it's most of it is all straightforward, basic stuff that we need you to know going forward. The next assessment is this written oral assessment. Okay, so let's have a quick look at that one as well. So I would suggest you do the practical one first, because this written one takes a little bit more effort. It's not as well. I say the practical one's easier because I enjoy doing practical stuff, and it just it feels like I'm doing something. Whereas reading and researching and reporting is something I enjoy less. But it might be the opposite way around for you. Okay. So basically, there's 2 parts of this. In part 1, there's a bit of a scenario. So have a look at the scenario. It's basically talking about a educational training organization, similar to maybe a TAFE or a smaller version of TAFE. And they're looking at wanting to use virtualization to teach courses. Oh, exactly like what we're doing here. So basically, first of all, gather some information. So you need to formulate a list of questions. So come up with a list of questions you want to ask. So there's a couple of things going on here. One of the things is that we want to know that you can actually communicate human to human, not just human to computers. We know that a lot of IT people, they're really awesome at their IT technical skills, but when it comes to interpersonal skills, they may struggle a little bit. And to be honest, a person who's going to do well in an IT job has to be a bit of both. As you know, if you're out at your on the job component, you're dealing with people on a day-to-day basis. You're not just dealing with computers. So the ability to be able to communicate effectively is very important. And so basically, you have to come up with a question. Your lecturer will become your client, and basically, some of the questions you may want to ask include, should come up with some questions that allows you to choose the right product for this company. So, for example, do they have a reliance on Microsoft operating systems and software? Do they use open source software, for example? Okay, there's a couple of questions, because if you go down to open source software, there's a few different options, whereas if you install Microsoft, there's a few different options. Some of them are the same. And what's even more important, what if they use Apple, Mac OS, God forbid? Okay, so what if they're using that? You can't rule that out. If you go down that track, maybe some of those solutions or products that we were thinking of may not even fit that criteria anymore. So just a question now that I think of it, does anyone use Mac themselves at home or at work? Vina does, yeah. So you have one as well. Well, the good thing for you guys is that remember that the VMware stuff from a VMware perspective, you can't get VMware Workstation for Mac, but what you can get is VMware Fusion, okay, which is effectively the same as VMware Workstation, but it's for the Mac OS. But just knowing what operating system or physical machines they have might influence what path you go down. Let's bear with me for a second. So Vina just made a comment. Yeah, so I don't have one, but I could just build a Mac in my VM. Well, you could be in trouble, Brock, because I'm not sure if you're aware, but Mac OS is only allowed to be installed on Mac hardware. So unless you had a Windows Mac on a Mac hardware, so you know that even if you buy a Mac computer, you can install Windows on it. If you have Windows on there, then you install VMware Workstation, then you actually install Apple Mac inside of that virtual machine, as you said, called a Hackintosh. Then that's legal. But unless you had a Mac hardware in the first place, then it will be breaking their license agreement. Okay, and Vina said, yeah, you have Windows now. That's good. So yeah, so luckily you guys didn't go off and buy a brand new Mac as far as getting a computer for your studies, because I've had students in the past who were all so excited about starting their semester studying IT, and they've gone out and they've got their parents to fork out $3,000 for a Mac laptop, and they bring it to TAFE and they're all happy with themselves, but then they realize they were using Windows all the time, and a lot of the things it doesn't work that smoothly with it. But it's less and less these days, especially with the Office 365 and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, getting back to what we were talking about. Yeah, you can boot both Mac with Windows, but you're basically paying $3,000 for a laptop with the same specs as if it's probably $1,500 if you bought it as a Windows type laptop. You get what I'm saying? It might look nice, it might be all flashy. You can go to a cafe and be impressive to people, but you might not be spending your money the most wisest way. But let's get back to what we're talking about. So basically, once you've had the questions, you ask your lecturer will role play that client of yours. And basically from that, what we're going to do is we're going to research 4 different hypervisors. Hypervisors is another word for virtualization software. And basically, we need to look up 2 desktop ones, like, for example, your VMware Workstation is the desktop hypervisor, meaning that it's installed on top of an operating system on a piece of hardware. Okay, whereas VMware vSphere or ESXi is a bare metal hypervisor because it's actually is part operating system, part hypervisor, meaning that it doesn't need a underlaying operating system to actually have that hypervisor on there. Can anyone imagine why we might want to eliminate that layer of the host operating system? Any reasons you might think of why we don't want to get rid of that host operating system? Yeah, good one, Brock. So if you remember, let's talk about memory. I'm using 16 gigs of memory on my physical computer, and that's with 3 virtual machines running. Okay, let's just turn them all off. Okay, so they're all turned off now, and that's gone. You can see my memory is dropped quite significantly. But even though the memory has dropped significantly because I've turned off those virtual machines, I do have a few things going on as well. So it's still using 8 gigs of RAM just for what I'm doing on my actual physical computer. You get me, guys? So basically, that means it's actually using those resources like Brock said. And I'm actually wasting those resources on the host operating system. I think he hashtag. Yeah, I reckon he's probably right. If I look at details and I look at mem usage, there we go, 500 megs for that Chrome, and 300 for that one. Teams as well. You can see it's a few tabs open, just a few tabs open on Google Chrome. So, but anyway, so bare metal is the type 1 hypervisor. Desktop virtualization products is the type 2 hypervisor. Still research on two of each type, and for each of those, report back on the hardware software requirements. You know, like to install this, you need this amount of CPU, that amount of hard drive space, etc., etc. What guest operating system it supports? So, what kind of guest operating system? Does it do only Windows as the guest operating system? Does it do Linux? Does it do BSD? Does it do any others? Okay, if it says Windows 8, XP, Windows 7, you don't have to list them all like that. You can just say all Windows operating system, Windows Server, etc., etc. Features and benefits. So we're talking about some of the really good features. Like, for example, if we take VMware Workstation as an example, VMware Workstation has the ability to snapshot, the ability to clone. Maybe I will elaborate a little bit more on what each of those are. But those are features and benefits, okay? The virtual networking, the encrypted virtual machines, the Unity, and there's probably many more. So just do a bit of research, identify some features and benefits, give me a little bit of a description for it. Then backup and restoration options. So I spoke about snapshots already, the idea of snapshots, restoring into that point in time of backup of the virtual machine anytime at all. But don't forget, virtual machines is just a bunch of files, aren't they? If they're a bunch of files, they could be backed up with other file backup technologies as well, including Microsoft Backup. So now out of those 4 that you've chosen, select a virtualization product that you would recommend for your client based on the scenario, based on the questions you've asked, and justify. Okay, maybe you've chosen this one because it's a market leader. It costs money, but it's this and that. Whatever your reasons are. Describe how the implemented virtual machine will be integrated into the existing network. How will the virtual machines that you create with these products interact with the physical network? So again, if we take VMware for example, VMware Workstation has those NAT and bridge virtual networks, don't they? And when you make a virtual machine on that is configured with the bridge network, it's effectively the same as saying that computer is directly plugged into the physical network through the network interface card of your physical machine. When you say a virtual machine is configured with the NAT virtual network, it's equivalent to say that that machine is in a little isolated network of its own that uses the NAT device, a bit like how you at home, your computers at home uses a NAT device, which is your ADSL router or your NBN router, to connect to the internet. But in our case, a virtual machine will use that NAT device to connect to the physical network. But describe it. Describe how your virtual machines can interact with the existing network. And don't go crazy. Okay, it's quite easy to go crazy with the amount of writing you're going to do. So that's 3 pages in total for this part 1. So really, you need to make sure you're putting down the right information, not just a whole bunch of information. Make sure you're addressing these requirements, because when, as a lecturer, as I'm marking, I'm making sure that whatever you're doing, you're going back and addressing these requirements. Part 2, okay, describe the advantages of virtualization. Okay, so I think we spoke about a few already today, but and I'm sure you can come up with a few more. And basically the advantages of virtualization and how we can use it. So again, 2 pages. Okay, so if that's the case, I would probably come up with four things, at a minimum, 4 advantages, and explaining how they are, making them like half a page each, giving you 2 pages. Are you guys okay with what I've described with the assessments? I don't think any of it is actually hard, and I don't mean to demean anyone that thinks that this is hard. It's just that you need to make sure that you do the learnings so that you're prepared for the practical test. So that becomes relatively straightforward once you've done all the learning activities. And this one, it's all about applying your understanding, doing better research, and reporting back. All right, so there was a question. So will our clients be given host employers, or is it just a joke? Sorry, Brock, what do you mean by that question? Will our clients be given host employers, or is that our job as well? Can you put your microphone on and explain what you mean by that?
So I was meaning like in the first part you've said that like one of you guys will be our client.
Yeah, so basically this is the scenario. So the scenario is there's a company, which is effectively a training organization, similar to TAFE, if you like to think of it.
Okay.
And there's an educational manager and 4 training staff. So it's a very small training organization. And they want to, the training staff will also be responsible for the installation and ongoing maintenance of the virtual environment. So basically that's the client, okay?
Yeah.
So you work, if in this scenario, if you like to think of it, you work for a company, our company called IT Works, and this is a company that's come to you for a solution to their challenges, okay? And part of this is to actually work out what they need, how their work is done, and so you can come up with the best solution for them.
Okay. Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay, good. Was there any other questions, guys, that anyone have any questions? Because don't forget, if just because you don't be shy, because just because you're thinking it doesn't mean everyone else is not thinking it. So if you ask, you're probably benefiting everyone else as well. So if you do have a question, ask me. And obviously, yeah, here we go. So basically the aim, so Liana asked, when is the assessment due? So if you remember, if we look at our course, if you look at this, there's 6 topics, 6 learning topics. Okay, it's a very small module. So today our aim was to cover 1 and 2. Tomorrow, the ideal would be covering 3 and 4. Next Tuesday, when we have class again, we'll be doing 5 and 6. And I suggested earlier today that on the next Wednesday, we'll be working towards finishing off these 2 assignments. Okay, so if you like to have a due date, it will be end of next week. And obviously, this is not to say that is the end of the road, you fail if it's not headed up and all that kind of stuff, but that's something we're trying to work toward. So is that okay with everyone? So if that's okay with everyone, what I'm going to do is I want you to get back to work. Work through your topics. So like I said, two topics a day in the 2 sessions in the morning, and the one in the afternoon is there to just to give you extra time to get work done, as well as to start working on the assignments. Okay, so get back to work, be task focused, and and uh, and uh, and uh, and ask me for help. So Brittany said, worried it will stress me out a little bit trying to balance this and work. So don't forget you got 2 days off from work to come into TAFE or come into our virtual classroom. And like I said, you're here for about 7 hours of work. And like I said, normally if you were a normal TAFE student, these topics will be covered one per class, and each class is about 2 hours. So basically, we're saying that you should be trying to do 2 topics a day. So trying to do 4 hours of work in about 7 hours. So hopefully that's plenty of time to get it done in class. And like we said before, there will be some requirement to do homework, especially if you're not getting the amount of not getting the task done in class. Yeah, we're only focusing for IVM now until we finish. And obviously, we're all starting at the same time on 4 IBM. Doesn't mean we're all going to finish at the same time. The hope is we do finish at the same time, but realistically, finish earlier. Someone will have to fix up stuff. And so when you finish with 4 IBM, which is hopefully the end of next week, then we'll start the next topic. So we're doing nothing else besides 4 IBM in these two days we have at TAFE, Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So they're the only things we're doing. So you've been working on the Office practice test. Yeah. So basically, the Microsoft Office, we can't actually do that in this virtual classroom. It has to be supervised. That's why initially that was our plan to go with that. But I don't think I wasn't with you guys for the whole induction, so we don't have to finish that off if you've started. I didn't even know you had access to our courses, to be honest. But yes, so if you look at your study plan, the 4 MOS subject is not even on your study plan. Yeah, so the only thing you have to focus on right now, Brittany and Liana or anyone else, is the 4 IVM. That's the only thing. Once we do this, then we move on to the next thing.